My darling children, the last thing my son-in-law, Kevin, said to me before I took his house, his car, and his job was, "You can't do this to me." His voice a pathetic mixture of outrage and disbelief as he stood in the driveway with a single suitcase to his name. I simply smiled, a calm, sad smile, and replied, "I'm not doing anything I taught you, Kevin. I'm simply taking back what has always been mine." And as I walked back into the beautiful home I had bought for my daughter, closing the door on the man who had shattered her heart, I felt a profound sense of grim, necessary satisfaction. Hello, everyone. I'm what you can call Grandma Catherine. My full name is Catherine Davenport. I'm 73 years old, and I come from the rolling horse country of Kentucky. This is a story about a day that began with my daughter's heartbreak and ended with her liberation. It's a secret I have kept for just over a year, a story of how a mother's love, when pushed too far, can become a formidable and righteous force. Even my own daughter, Emily, doesn't know the full extent of the quiet arrangements I made that day to protect her. She just knows that the man who broke her heart seemed to lose everything overnight. Until today, I finally have the courage to explain how it all happened. Before I begin, my sweethearts, would you do an old woman a great kindness? Please, if you would, like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support is a comfort, a reminder that a mother's fierce love is something to be celebrated. It gives me the strength to share this very personal story of justice. You see, children, this story isn't just about a cheating husband getting his comeuppance. It's about a promise I made to my late husband George on his deathbed. He and I built a successful chain of hardware stores from the ground up. We worked side by side for 40 years. Before he passed, he made me promise I would always use the fruits of our labor to protect our only child, Emily. "Catherine," he'd said, his voice weak but his eyes firm, "our wealth isn't for showing off. It's a shield. You use it to keep our girl safe." I thought I was doing that when I welcomed her husband, Kevin, into our family and our business. I gave him everything: a beautiful home in my name, a luxury car from the company fleet, and a high-paying executive position he was not remotely qualified for. I thought I was building a life for them. I didn't realize I was just building a golden cage for my daughter, with a man who would one day try to fly away, leaving her locked inside. This is the story of how I reminded him that I was the one who held the key. To understand the cold, swift justice of that day, you must first understand the years of warm, patient generosity that preceded it. It all began so perfectly, as these tragedies so often do. My daughter, Emily, is the gentlest soul you could ever meet. She's a first-grade teacher, full of kindness and patience, with a heart as big as the sky. She has always been a little too trusting, a little too willing to see the good in people, a trait she gets from her father. When she brought Kevin home 15 years ago, my heart was full of hope. He was handsome, charismatic, with a quick laugh and a smile that seemed to reach his eyes. He worked as a salesman for some small-time supplier, and he had a hunger, a drive, that I initially mistook for admirable ambition. Most importantly, he seemed to utterly adore my Emily. He would listen to her stories about her first graders with rapt attention, bring her wildflowers, and tell her she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. He was deferential and charming to me and George. He called us Mr. and Mrs. Davenport and always offered to help with the dishes after dinner. I remember him sitting on our porch with my husband, talking about business. "Sir," he said, his voice full of earnest sincerity, "my biggest dream is to build a life so secure that Emily never has to worry about a single thing." My husband, a man who had started with nothing but a toolbox and a dream, was impressed. He saw a younger version of himself in Kevin's ambition. When Emily and Kevin got married, George offered him a job, a management track position in our company, Davenport Hardware and Supply. "The boy's got fire in his belly, Catherine," George told me. "Let's give him a place to channel it. Keep him close, keep Emily close." And so we did. We brought him into the fold. He became family. When my George passed away 5 years later, Kevin stepped up. He was my rock. He helped me with the funeral arrangements. He managed the company while I was grieving, and he was a strong shoulder for Emily to cry on. I was so grateful. In my grief, I leaned on him. I trusted him completely. That's when I made the decisions that would, years later, give me all the power. Emily and Kevin were living in a small starter home. I wanted to give them the life George and I had always envisioned for our daughter. So I bought them a house. A magnificent, sprawling brick home in the best part of town, with a huge yard and a beautiful kitchen. But I kept the deed in my name. It's just simpler for tax purposes, dear, I told Emily, and she, in her trusting way, never questioned it. Then, as his role in the company grew, I assigned him a company car, a top-of-the-line luxury sedan. The title, of course, remained with the company, with me as the sole owner. And I gave him a promotion he hadn't earned. I made him the executive vice president of operations, with a salary that was frankly obscene for his level of experience. I did it all for Emily. I wanted her to have a life of comfort and ease. I wanted her husband to feel like a success, a big man, so he would always cherish her. Those were the golden years. My granddaughter Lily was born, and the big brick house was filled with her laughter. My life settled into a happy rhythm. I would host Sunday dinners, and the house would be filled with the aroma of my cooking. Kevin would be at the head of the table, telling funny stories about work, looking every bit the successful executive and doting family man. I would look at my Emily, at her happy, relaxed face, and I would think George would be so proud. I kept my promise. Our girl is safe. I poured my love, my energy, and a significant portion of the Davenport hardware fortune into building this perfect life for them. I truly believed I had created an unshakable foundation for their happiness. I saw a man who was grateful, a husband who was loving, a father who was present. I was so focused on the beautiful facade I had built that I didn't see the rot that was festering within the walls. I never imagined that the man who was living in my house, driving my car, and cashing my paychecks was planning to burn it all to the ground, with my daughter still inside. My dears, the perfect life I thought I had built for them didn't crumble all at once. It was more like a slow, insidious pest infestation. You notice a few strange things here and there. A little pile of sawdust in a corner, a faint scratching sound in the walls at night. You tell yourself it's nothing, that the house is old and just settling. But the signs keep multiplying, until you're forced to admit that something is chewing away at the very foundations of your home. At first, it was just his new hobbies. Kevin, who had always been a homebody, suddenly developed a passion for golf. "It's for networking, Catherine," he'd explain, polishing a new set of expensive clubs in the garage. "All the big contracts are signed on the golf course." He started spending every Saturday, from sunup to sundown, at an exclusive country club. Emily and Lily would be at home, and he would be out networking. Then came the business trips. They started as once a quarter, then once a month, then every other week. He'd fly off to conferences in exciting cities like Miami and Las Vegas, places not typically known for hardware supply conventions. Little by little, his attention, which had once been a warm, focused beam on my daughter, began to scatter. He grew distant, distracted. He was always on his phone, texting and smiling at things she couldn't see. If she walked into the room, he would quickly lock the screen. "Just a hilarious email from the guys in sales," he'd say with a dismissive wave. A cold fear, sharp and unwelcome, began to prickle at my heart. Maybe I was just being paranoid? Emily, my sweet, trusting Emily, certainly thought so. She made excuses for him. "He's working so hard for us, Mom," she'd tell me, her voice trying to convince herself as much as me. "He's under a lot of pressure to perform." She saw a dedicated executive. I, having run the company for decades, saw an absentee employee whose sales numbers, curiously, didn't seem to reflect all this networking and business development. Then the hurtful details began to pile up, like dead leaves in autumn, signaling a dying season. He started criticizing Emily, always with a little laugh to soften the blow, but the words were sharp. "Honey, don't you think that dress is a little teachery?" He'd say as she was getting ready for a dinner out. Or, "Let's try to keep the kids' toys out of the living room." It looked so cluttered. He was slowly chipping away at her confidence, making her feel that she, in her gentle, unassuming way, was not quite good enough for the grand life he was supposedly providing. My heart felt like someone was squeezing it with their bare hands every time I saw the light in her eyes dim a little more. I tried to talk to him once, gently. We were in his home office, the one I paid for, with the mahogany desk I had bought him. "Kevin," I said, keeping my voice even. "Emily seems a little down lately. Is everything all right with you two?" He leaned back in his big leather chair, a picture of corporate success, and gave me a condescending smile. "Oh, Catherine," he said, calling me by my first name, which he only did when he was feeling particularly superior. "Don't worry about it. Emily's just a little emotional sometimes. You know how women can be. It's probably just her hormones." "Yeah, hormones." The dismissal was so total, so patronizing, it took my breath away. He was not just ignoring her feelings. He was invalidating them, reducing her legitimate sadness to a female failing. At that moment, I felt like the sky was falling, but I was the only one looking up. The first concrete piece of evidence landed in my lap by sheer accident. My company, Davenport Hardware, had a corporate credit card for senior executives. As the owner, I received a detailed, itemized statement every month, which I usually just glanced at and filed. But one month, a charge caught my eye. A charge for over $2,000 from a high-end lingerie boutique in Miami. It was listed under client entertainment. My blood ran cold. I knew for a fact Kevin's conference in Miami that month involved meeting with concrete suppliers, burly men who were not in the market for silk and lace. I started digging. I pulled the statements from the last 6 months. And there it was. A trail of breadcrumbs documenting a secret life. Jewelry stores in Chicago. Extravagant dinners for two in New Orleans. Spa packages at luxury hotels. All of it, billed to my company, to my husband's legacy, as business expenses. Tears just wouldn't stop flowing. As I sat in my office, the statement spread out before me. It wasn't just the betrayal of my daughter. It was the betrayal of my trust, of my husband's memory. This man, this parasite, was using the very company we built to fund his sordid affairs. The sheer, unmitigated gall of it left me shaking with a rage so profound that it made me feel ill. I told myself to be strong for Emily's sake. I couldn't confront him without irrefutable proof of who the client was. That proof came on a Friday afternoon. My private investigator, a discreet and highly effective man I had hired after finding the receipts, delivered a manila envelope to my office. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were photographs. Pictures of Kevin, my son-in-law, in Miami. He was laughing, his arm draped around a young woman, a blonde half his age. They were walking out of the lingerie boutique. They were kissing on a moonlit beach. They were entering a hotel room together. The pain was a physical blow. Seeing it in black and white, or rather in full lurid color, made it real. The sweet, loving husband, the doting father, the successful executive. It was all performance. A lie. And my daughter was the unsuspecting audience, and I was the unwitting financier of the entire production. I sat with those photos for a week, my heart a battlefield of grief, rage, and a terrible protective love for my daughter. What should I do? How could I tell her? The knowledge was a cancer in my soul. I knew that the moment I revealed it, my daughter's happy golden world would shatter into 1,000,000 pieces. The breaking point came not from me, but from him. It was a Saturday. He and Emily were supposed to come for dinner. An hour before they were due to arrive, Emily called me, her voice thick with tears. "Mom, Kevin has to work again. He just left." 10 minutes later, my private investigator called. "Mrs. Davenport," he said, his voice flat and professional. "Just an update. The subject is not at his office. His car is currently parked at a condominium complex across town. He entered Building C, Apartment 4B, 20 minutes ago. The apartment is registered to a Miss Tiffany Blake, age 26. That was it. He wasn't even bothering to hide it well anymore. He was with her, right now, while my daughter was at home, crying because she believed he was working late for her benefit. The rage that filled me then was as clean and pure as fire. It burned away all my hesitation, all my fear. The time for quiet investigation was over. The time for protecting my daughter by hiding the truth was over. The only way to protect her now was to arm her with it. But I knew I couldn't just show her the photos. A man like Kevin would find a way to lie, to twist it, to turn it back on her. No, he had to confess. He had to be caught so completely, so utterly, that there was no room for lies. A cold, calm plan began to form in my mind. It was time for this little drama to have its final act, and I would be the one setting the stage. My dears, the moment my investigator confirmed Kevin was with that woman, something inside me shifted. The grief and the shock were still there, like a deep, throbbing bruise. But a new feeling came roaring to the surface, a mother's righteous fury. The final straw wasn't just his betrayal. It was his utter contempt for my daughter's intelligence, her love, her time. He was flaunting his disrespect, confident in the belief that we were all too foolish or too weak to do anything about it. In that moment, something inside me didn't just break. It was forged into something new, something hard and sharp and absolutely resolute. I knew I couldn't go on like this anymore, watching from the sidelines as he slowly poisoned my daughter's life with his lies. I had to intervene. I had to end it. My awakening was a call to arms. My counterattack would be a carefully orchestrated ambush, designed not just to expose him, but to strip him of all his power, all his excuses, all his weapons, until he was left with nothing but the ugly, undeniable truth of who he was. This was a grandma-style counterattack, using my deep knowledge of his personality, his arrogance, his greed, his cowardice, and the immense resources I had at my disposal. From trembling hands that had held the photographs of his affair, I now moved with the firm determination of a general preparing for battle. From swallowing the bitter taste of his lies, I was now preparing to force-feed him the truth. My first call was to my daughter. "Emily, sweetheart," I said, my voice warm and steady, hiding the storm raging inside me. "I'm so sorry Kevin has to work. Why don't you and Lily come over to my house? I'll make us a special dinner, just the three of us girls." I needed her out of that house. The house was about to become a war room. My second call was to my investigator. "Mr. Harris," I said, my voice all business. "I need you to stay put. Keep your eyes on that apartment. The moment the subject leaves, I want you to follow him. Do not let him out of your sight, and keep a line open to me at all times." As soon as Emily and my granddaughter were safely at my house, eating pizza and watching a movie, I drove to their home. To my home. I let myself in with my own key. The house was quiet, filled with the evidence of my daughter's loving, family-centered life. Lily's drawings on the fridge, a half-finished puzzle on the coffee table. The sight of it all fueled my resolve. I sat down in the formal living room, the one reserved for guests, and I waited. I was calm. I was focused. The passive endurance was over. The active attack was about to begin. 2 hours later, my phone buzzed. It was Mr. Harris. "He's on the move, Mrs. Davenport. He's heading home. Thank you, Mr. Harris," I said. "Your services are concluded. Please send me your final invoice." I had all the proof I needed. The rest was up to me. I heard his car pull into the driveway. I heard his key in the lock. He walked into the foyer, whistling softly, a man without a care in the world. He stopped dead when he saw me sitting there in the dim light. "Catherine," he said, his surprise quickly melting into a false hearty cheer. "What are you doing here? I thought you were with Emily and Lily." "Emily and Lily are at my house," I said, my voice quiet and even. "I was waiting for you. We need to talk, Kevin." A flicker of annoyance, then wariness, crossed his face. "Can it wait? I'm exhausted. It was a brutal day at the office." "I'm sure it was," I said, my voice dangerously soft. "But no, it cannot wait. Sit down." The command in my voice, a tone he had never heard from me before, made him obey. He sat gingerly on the edge of the sofa opposite me. Kevin, I began, I'm going to make this very simple. I know about Tiffany Blake. I know about the apartment. I know about the apartment. I know about Miami and Chicago and the lingerie. I know everything. The color drained from his face. It was a sight to behold. His charming, confident mask dissolved in an instant, replaced by the slack-jawed panic of a cornered rat. I don't know what you're talking about, he stammered, the lie weak and pathetic. I didn't argue. I simply reached down beside my chair and lifted the manila envelope onto the coffee table between us. Then perhaps these will refresh your memory, I said. He stared at the envelope as if it were a venomous snake. He didn't touch it. He didn't have to. He knew what was inside. You spied on me? He whispered, trying to shift the blame, to paint himself as the victim. I investigated the man who was stealing from my company and cheating on my daughter. I corrected him calmly. There is a difference. He fell silent, his mind racing, trying to find a way out. I didn't give him one. Now, here is what is going to happen, I said, leaning forward. You are going to go upstairs and pack one single suitcase with your clothes and only your clothes. You can't just throw me out. This is my house. No, Kevin, I said, my voice as cold as ice. This is my house. The deed is in my name. You are a guest who has spectacularly overstayed his welcome. Emily will never stand for this. He tried a desperate gambit. She loves me. Emily, I said, the words hurting my own heart to say, will be devastated. But she is a strong woman, and she will heal. And she will do it without the poison of your lies in her life. She will have this beautiful house, a generous alimony that I will personally fund, and full custody of her daughter. You will not fight her on any of it. You can't make me, he snarled. A flash of his true, oogly self appeared. Oh, Kevin, I sighed. I can. You see, if you fight her on the divorce, if you try to take one thing from her that she is not offering, then this envelope. I tapped the package of photos, and a complete audit of your expense reports will be sent not just to her divorce attorney, but to the district attorney's office. Fraud and embezzlement are such ugly words, don't you think? They tend to make it very difficult to get another job. He stared at me, his chest rising and falling rapidly. He was trapped, utterly and completely. The life of luxury, the power, the beautiful wife he had used as a status symbol. I was taking it all away in a single quiet conversation. And the car? He asked, his voice a hoarse whisper. The Mercedes is a company car, I said. And as of this moment, you are no longer an employee of Davenport Hardware. Your termination is effective immediately. You can leave the keys on the kitchen counter. I'm sure you're resourceful enough to call a taxi. This was the final checkmate. The house was mine. The car was mine. His job was mine to give, and it was mine to take away. He had built his entire identity on the foundations I had provided, and he had forgotten that the person who builds the foundation can also tear it down. He stood up, his body seeming to shrink before my eyes. The arrogant, confident executive was gone, replaced by a defeated, pathetic man. He didn't say another word. He just turned and walked up the stairs. I sat there, in the quiet living room, and I listened to the sounds of him packing. The sounds of my daughter's life being cleansed. It was not a moment of joy, my dears, but it was a moment of profound, painful, and necessary justice. My promise to my husband was finally being fulfilled. I was keeping our girls safe. He came downstairs 10 minutes later, pulling a single suitcase. He didn't look at me. He walked to the kitchen counter, took the keys to the Mercedes out of his pocket, and placed them there with a soft click that sounded as final as a gavel. Then he walked out the front door, into the night, and out of our lives. I watched from the window until the taxi's red tail lights disappeared down the street. The house was quiet. The parasite was gone. The clear outcome of his actions was swift and total. He lost everything in one evening, because in truth, he had never really owned any of it. He had been living a life on loan, and his credit had finally run out. The conversation I had with Emily the next day was the hardest of my life. I drove to my house, where she and Lily had slept, blissfully unaware. I sat her down at my kitchen table, and with the folder of photographs between us, I told her everything. I watched the man she loved, the life she had built, crumble to dust in her eyes. Her heartbreak was a terrible, gaping wound. There were days of tears, of rage, of a grief so profound I thought it might swallow her whole. But my Emily, my gentle, kind-hearted Emily, has a spine of steel she inherited from her father. Beneath the pain, she found a strength she never knew she had. She saw the truth of Kevin's betrayal, not just of her, but of her trust, her time, and her love. She mourned the man she thought he was, and then she let him go. The divorce was quiet and uncontested. He had no power, no money, and no leverage to fight. He signed the papers without a word. Emily and Lily kept the house, free and clear. I set up a trust that would provide for them for the rest of their lives, ensuring she would never have to depend on another man again. He simply vanished. I hear sometimes, through the grapevine, that he is a salesman again, for some small company in another state, living in a small apartment, his life of luxury, a distant memory. What goes around, my dears, truly does come around. The lesson I learned, or rather, the lesson I was reminded of, is that a mother's love must sometimes be fierce. It must be a shield. My husband knew that. He knew that true protection isn't just about providing comfort. It's about having the strength to defend against threats, even when they come from within your own family. I thought giving Kevin everything would make him love my daughter more. I learned that giving a man of weak character unearned power only makes him more entitled, more arrogant, and more dangerous. And so, to all of you out there, my dear sweethearts, I want to speak directly to you. If you are giving your love and support to someone, please listen to Grandma. Children, remember Grandma's words. Generosity is a virtue, but discernment is a necessity. Never build a throne for someone who is not worthy of wearing a crown. At this age, I finally understand that you must never hand over the keys to your own house, literally or figuratively, to someone who has not earned your complete and utter trust. I hope you will always hold on to your own keys. It has been a year. The house that was once a stage for a terrible lie is now a true home again, filled with my daughter's strength and my granddaughter's joy. Emily is thriving. She has gone back to teaching, and her classroom is filled with the same kindness and patience she has always had. But now it's tempered with a new wisdom, a new self-respect. She is more beautiful and more herself than I have ever seen her. My relationship with her is stronger than ever. It is built now not just on love, but on a shared, quiet truth. I am her mother, her protector, her anchor, and she is my hero. Sharing this very private story with you all has been a weight off my shoulders. Thank you for listening, without judgment, for allowing an old woman to share her family's painful, but ultimately triumphant journey. Please, my dears, if this story moved you, I would be so honored if you would like the video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on that little notification bell so we can continue to share our lives. Your comments are a great source of joy for me. So please, share your own stories of a time when you had to be a fierce protector for someone you love. Grandma will always love you all. Remember, be kind, be generous, but also be wise. Be the safe harbor for your loved ones, but also be the formidable battleship that guards the entrance. Everyone deserves to be protected by a love that is both gentle and strong. Love you all. This is Grandma Catherine, and I'll see you in the next story.